Hello and welcome to another video on job lore. After talking about Black Mage and White Mage, it's only natural that it's time to hit Red Mage. Basically my main all through Shadowbringers and still a reliable standby. We're going to be looking at their history, equipment, abilities and story to learn all we can. Quick spoiler warning, we're going to be talking about Red Mage's job quest line, as well as parts of Endwalker that I'll try not to spoil. Although this time we're talking very slightly more about that expansion than normal. If you're into this, do YouTube things with likes, comments, and subscribes and all that. And with that, let's get to it. The last of the 6 jobs that originated from Final Fantasy I, Red Mage was the all-rounder. It could do a little bit of everything, a little bit worse than everyone else. Usually the all-rounder comes out at around the middle of the pack, but in the NES version, the Red Mage was pretty good just because it wasn't as reliant on the many buggy stats as a specialist. Tracing Red Mage in the series is a little weird though, because it's plausible to argue that basically every character without a specific job that can use various kinds of magic is a Red Mage. You could argue Cloud Strife is a Red Mage and I wouldn't be able to tell you no. But in terms of the job when it actually gets named, it tends to keep that all-rounder status, occasionally using its speed to become the fast mage, while never quite nailing down an angle. In Final Fantasy V, it brought dual spell to the table. The Evilist games gave it a focus on status magic. But 14 Red Mage's closest relative might actually not be from Final Fantasy at all, but from its appearance in Bravely Default. That series gives Red Mage a bunch of tools to basically give it extra turns, so you can see it become the same sort of high activity spellcaster that it does in 14. Finally, one tiny little extra bit. Why is it called Red Mage? Why does black and white equal red? Well, that stems from Dragonlance, the old D&D setting. In that, magic users were color-coded by alignment. White for good, black for evil, red for neutral. Why did Dragonlance do this? Couldn't tell you, but that's why Final Fantasy does it. For Red Mage's history in 14's world, we look to the 6th Umbral Calamity and the same refugee clusters that would go on to form the Fist of Rolga. Also among those refugees were the mages of both Mark and Amdapor, both rather disliked among the rest of the refugees. This broad hatred brought the two disparate groups together, along with the fact their nations had both fallen, and both white and black mages agreed that while magic had brought them calamity, it also had the power to rebuild. Together, they developed a school that combined both of their skill sets, using a more efficient method of drawing on the caster's own ether rather than the land around them, as well as both incorporating sword techniques from some Elezen refugees of the era, which, if you didn't know, is all incorporated into Red Mage's icon. The White Mage icon, flipped upside down, with the Black Mage icon taped to it to make a rapier. Red magic was used considerably in the 6th Umbral era, as its practitioners wielded the skill set to protect survivors. But as time went on and the 6th Astral era dawned, Red magic faltered, eventually being near forgotten. The skill set did live on in small groups though, with the last notable Red Mages being of the Crimson Duelists, a band of Red Mages that fought against Mad King Theodoric before being suddenly betrayed and torn apart in the subsequent Imperial invasion. So, let's see what the Encyclopedia Eorzea says about Red Mage's equipment and abilities. As usual, I'll note that while they describe a lot of Red Mage's weapons, I'm only focusing on the ones actually tied to Red Mage. Stormblood's Duelist set is archetypal Red Mage gear, and works well to explain their fashion style. Unlike other magic users, Red Mages need equipment that fosters their ability to move freely. Because of that, classical Red Mage garb instead lives from traditional Elezen swordsmen, a tradition that might not exist on its own anymore, judging by the fact we've never seen it. This typical swordsman's garb is then bolstered with arcane elements from both white and black magic, and then dyed a deep red to show very clearly that Red Mages are not the same as their predecessors. Add a cape to provide even more room for arcane geometries, and the feathered hat for honestly just pure fashion, and you have the classic Red Mage look. The only other outfit worth discussing is the red attire that the last remaining Crimson Duelist, Jirun Tia, we don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm going with that, commissioned from the Weavers Guild for novice red mages to train in. Apparently, Redolent Rose blew any potential profit they ever could have had by being a complete perfectionist over the specific shade of red dye. Red mages' weapons are specifically called dueling arms, because the small size allowed them to be easily at hand at all times, making them the first thing at hand for defending your honor. Strangely, the only explicitly red mage attached weapon is Murglice, the Stormblood artifact weapon, originally favoured by Count Ganelon, who taught the first red mages the art of the rapier, despite the fact that he was branded a traitor for consorting with the mages that destroyed the land. The only other weapon even tangentially related to red mages, strangely, the ruby tied rapier found in Shisui. Apparently, a blacksmith in Sui no Sato discovered a book of fantastical Eorzean tales in the wreckage of a trading ship, and strove to make a blade similar to the one wielded by a, quote, swashbuckling red mage described in them. The result is probably nothing like what the author of that story was picturing, but became popular among students of red magic anyway. Fun, but the crown for most impressive job relic is still with the Stardust Rod. Sorry, red mages. Now, the abilities, although the descriptions are weirdly sparse. Moulinet means windmill or water wheel, and is named for its wide, sweeping motion. Interestingly, despite their parallel uses, Verflare and Verholy actually have different origins. Verflare essentially aims to imitate the spell it's named after by overlapping a number of small arcane explosions, but isn't related to Flare otherwise. Meanwhile, Verholy is actually adapted from the famous and terrifying Holy spell, and was devised to deal with the lingering void sense still hanging around from the War of the Magi. The Ver in all those red mage spell names comes from Vermilion, by the way. Speaking of, their limit break, Vermilion Scourge. The mage scribes 2 Eldritch circles on the ground and charges them with both black and white magic to create a massive explosion. As usual, we ask, does that sound emotionally amplified by Dynamis? I'm going to say plausible, not definite, but judging by every single team I've ever seen complain about its animation, they're definitely emotionally amplified by it. Like with Ninja, we first see Red Mage in the main story. When Alisaie turns back up to fight the Warriors of Darkness, she cracks out our first glimpse at the rapier and spell focus. Talking to her later on, she tells us that she learned it in her travels from a wandering Makoti man, who also happens to be our Ren. We meet the man of the hour, Jirun Tia, while rescuing a pair of kids from some hostile mages. We learn very quickly that these mages are part of a... well, the game calls them a cabal, but that implies they're an organized group. What they actually are is a bunch of kidnapped and brainwashed puppets mind-controlled by a single person. We gatecrash their attempt to transport Garlean armaments, thereby confirming who they're working with, and also find a crate with a girl inside. All she can remember is her name, Arya. Now, I don't know Game of Thrones very well, but I have been told that a lot of the scenes surrounding her do include references to Arya Stark, so there you go. We go on to track their leader down, and discover that it's a man named Lambard, the man who betrayed the Crimson Duelists, killing all but Jirun in the name of the Garleans. We also find out that Arya can do magic, which is good because Jirun starts teaching her red magic. It's eventually uncovered just what Lambard is doing. Under orders from Xenos, he's mind control recruiting a bunch of magic-using, expendable shock troops to throw at the Alamegan Resistance and their allies. After discovering that they intend to kill the Garlond Ironworks Deputy President Jesse, we lay a trap they fall right into, and learn Lambard's secret. It turns out Lambard was underwhelmed by red magic, and overcame its limitation of only using the caster's own ether by becoming a vampire. Yeah, turns out draining other people's ether is a pretty useful way to bolster a skill set based on using your own. Still not enough for him to win though. Incidentally, Jirun also mentions a couple times having contacts in the Scions that aren't us. He doesn't even know we're in them. And yeah, natural assumption is Alisaie, until we learn that nope, it's actually Riol, the Spy Master, and to be honest, my favourite B-list Scion. In the Stormblood storyline, or at least Stormblood's level range, all of Red Mage's story came in Stormblood, we learn Arya's great secret, kept even from her, that she's a vampire too! She's much worse at it though, genuinely just terrible, can't do a single thing. To learn how to cure her, we first go to the ziggurat. Learning that it was actually first built by the first red mages, we find out that both Lambard and Arya are descendants of an ancient red mage attempt to overcome their new school's weaknesses by contracting with a voidsent. To learn how to handle that voidsent problem, we head to Gubal Library, eventually finding out that both Arya and Lambard are from a clan of book called the Nightkin, descendants of a group that once contracted with the higher-ranking voidsent Lilith by drinking her blood. While we're in Gubal, we also find Eorzean true crime novels and blasphemous pornography, but that's not important. What is important is Lilith, who you might remember from my Black Mage video as the source of Black Mage's Zodiac weapon. Her being the original voidsent makes her the head vampire, and if The Simpsons has taught us anything, it's that you have to kill the head vampire. We find her in a Marquis containment unit, and while she makes a ploy to steal Arya's body, it goes just terribly for her and we kill her, thereby curing Arya of her curse. After that though, Jirun announces that he has to move on, continue wandering to spread red magic and fight the Empire, leaving us and Arya behind to learn red magic by our own path. The Shadowbringers quest has us and Arya follow a case of grave robbing in Ala Mhigo. In thought, Jirun would also be there. He is, but he keeps wandering. We get proof he's still okay in an incidental little cameo in Endwalker that sadly neither the Warrior of Light or Arya are privy to. In the brief shot of the Blasphemy awakening in Ala Mhigo, we see him wandering the streets of the Ala Mhigan Quarter alongside Nashmira, the trainer for the Dancer questline. Honestly, I'm not a shipping sort, but I'm going to be honest, if you told me that those two were a thing, I'd believe it. But there we have it. Everything we know about Red Mage, at least until Jirun presumably enters Castlevania. This is also the last of this batch of job lore videos. They've been fun, but there are a couple videos I want to make that are gonna need more time to put together. I might come back to the jobs if people are into it. I've got my eye on a request that's pretty enticing just because it fixes a problem with my weird idiosyncratic approach to this. If you like this, encourage me with YouTube buttons, and I'll leave you with a primer on what we've learned about Red Mage. By series history, we should get pretty good at everything, but not that good. By the equipment, apparently fashion is an absolutely vital component, and according to the job story, we should consider vampirism, but try not to be jerks about it. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope to see you again real soon.